Tiana Washington had learned, over 5 years, that loneliness doesn't always look like being alone. Sometimes it looks like a perfectly set table for two, candlelight, a view of the Han River worth more than most people's homes, a husband's name on the reservation of a restaurant she'd canceled twice already because he never made it. She sat by herself in the penthouse dining room, still in the dress she'd chosen that morning, running her thumb along the stem of an untouched wine glass. 5 years married. She could still remember exactly what it felt like the first year, how his attention used to land on her like something warm, undivided, entirely hers. She couldn't remember exactly when that had started slipping away, only that it had, slowly, the way a tide pulls back so gradually you don't notice the shore has changed until you're standing somewhere you don't recognize. She thought of the folder she'd found in his study the week before, sealed, marked with a red stamp she didn't recognize. When she'd asked, he'd shut it so fast the corner of a page tore. It's nothing. Work. It hadn't felt like nothing. It had felt like one more door closing gently in her face, so gently she'd almost stopped noticing the sound. The candles burned lower. She didn't light new ones. Across the city, on the 52nd floor of Lee Medical Technologies, the board meeting was finally ending. 12 executives closed their laptops. Gun Woo remained seated, scanning a supply report, sharp eyes moving line by line, when his assistant Soo Jin leaned toward him. "Sir, today is your anniversary." His pen stopped. He'd forgotten. 5 years, and the date had slipped past him like another line in a quarterly filing. "Clear my calendar," he said quietly. "I'll leave within the hour." Soo Jin hesitated. "Director Kim asked for a private word before you go. He said the Geneva shipment numbers need your sign-off tonight. Something about a discrepancy that can't wait for morning." Gunwoo's jaw tightened. Kim rarely flagged anything as urgent without reason. That was exactly why people trusted him. "Tell him 15 minutes. That's all I have." Down the hall, Director Kim watched the clock on his office wall, unhurried, a small, unreadable patience in his expression. He'd chosen tonight for the Geneva question on purpose, not because the numbers couldn't wait, but because he'd learned, over 11 years beside Gunwoo, exactly which nights mattered most to keep him occupied. He didn't smile. He simply waited, the way a man waits who has learned that patience is more useful than force. By the time Gunwoo left the building, 40 extra minutes had disappeared from his evening, and he never once suspected they'd been taken from him on purpose. Gunwoo stepped off the elevator at 9:14 p.m., tie loosened, exhaustion written across a face that rarely showed anything at all. "Tiana, I'm sorry. The board ran long, and then Kim needed—" He stopped. She was standing beside the table, hands folded, and in her right hand, catching the candlelight, was the executive security badge he had given her the night they married. The one that let her walk into any building he owned without being stopped. The one that had once meant she belonged in his world, not just his home. She set it gently on his desk. "I don't need your protection anymore." The words landed like something breaking, quiet and final. His mind moved fast, the way it always did in crisis, and for the first time in years, it landed on the wrong answer. "If this is about a divorce, it's not about a paper." Her voice didn't rise. It never did. "It's about a marriage, and I stopped feeling like your partner a long time ago." He opened his mouth, closed it. "I stopped feeling like a person you talk to," she said, "and started feeling like a person you manage, something you check on between meetings." She shook her head slowly. "I used to think it was the hours. Now I think it's something else. I think you don't know how to let anyone stand close enough to actually see you. Everything I do to protect you." "I know." Her eyes were steady, not angry. "That was almost worse. That's the problem, Gunwoo. You've spent 5 years protecting me from everyone in the world except yourself." She picked up her coat. He didn't stop her. He told himself there was nothing left to say. The truth was, he didn't know where to begin, and some of what he would have had to explain wasn't only about them. The badge sat under the lamplight, long after the elevator doors closed behind her. His phone buzzed once. A message from a hidden sender, 3 letters and a number, nothing his assistant would recognize. He turned the screen face down without reading it, and stood there a long time, staring at the badge like it had spoken instead of her. Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one you're not going to forget. He was the CEO of Korea's largest medical technology company, a man respected across 3 continents, feared in every boardroom he ever walked into. She was his wife, a brilliant trauma surgeon, beautiful, elegant, and quietly the strongest person in every room she entered. To the outside world, they had it all. But tonight, on their 5th wedding anniversary, she's going to do something no one, not the board, not the company, not even her husband, ever saw coming. She's going to take off the executive badge he gave her the night they got married and set it down on his desk. I don't need your protection anymore. He'll think it's about a divorce. It's not. What follows is a story about a marriage built on protection instead of trust. A 5-year-old secret buried to keep her safe. A corporate conspiracy that's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. And one man who's about to lose everything to prove that love isn't about carrying someone's burdens alone. It's about finally letting them carry it with you. Stay until the end, because the way this story closes is going to hit you harder than you expect. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. New stories drop every week. And if you've been here before, you already know what kind of night we're in for. Let's get into it. Daniel Park found him there an hour later, still in the same suit, the badge untouched. I heard, Daniel said, closing the door behind him. You've spent years protecting her from everyone. Daniel went on when Gun-woo said nothing. Everyone except yourself. You don't understand what's at stake. Then tell her, or tell me, if you can't tell her yet. Daniel's voice sharpened. Whatever you're carrying alone, it's not just costing you the company anymore. It's costing you her. Gun-woo's eyes flicked, briefly, toward the study where a sealed folder sat locked away. Daniel followed the glance and said nothing further. He already knew more than he was supposed to, and less than he wanted to. She's safer not knowing, Gun-woo said quietly. Safer from what, exactly? Gun-woo didn't answer. 2 days later, Tiana stood in her sister Maya's small apartment, folding the last of her clothes into a suitcase that felt lighter than it should have. Maya leaned in the doorway, watching her with the fierce, careful eyes of someone who'd warned her about this world from the beginning. You're really doing this? I already did it. Tiana zipped the case closed, a photocopy of an old file page tucked beneath the folded scrubs at the bottom, one she'd kept for months without fully understanding why she couldn't throw it out. The next morning, she pulled her hair back, put on scrubs instead of silk, and walked through the doors of the hospital where she'd once saved lives before she'd ever worn a Lee family name. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Behind her, in a glass office 52 floors above the city, Lee Gun-woo sat alone with a badge on his desk, and, 2 floors below him, Director Kim closed his laptop for the night, satisfied that the wedge between his oldest friend and the one person who might have made him harder to control had finally, quietly, done its work. St. Anne's Medical Center hadn't changed much in 5 years. Same fluorescent lights, same chaos rolling through the double doors every few hours. When Tiana walked onto the floor in scrubs, a nurse named Priya actually dropped her clipboard. Dr. Washington? Priya stared like she'd seen a ghost. I thought you were. I was, Tiana said, pulling her hair back. Now I'm not. Word spread fast. Nobody asked about the penthouse, or the husband, or the life she'd stepped out of. They just handed her a chart and said, Bed 6 needs you. She hadn't felt this useful in years. Across town, Gun-woo sat in his office long after his staff had gone home, staring at a security feed he had no business watching. Jae-sung, head of executive security, stood at attention near the door. I want a team on her, Gun-woo said. Discreet. She's not to know. Jae-sung hesitated. Sir, she left the company's protection herself. If she finds out, she won't. Gun-woo's voice left no room for argument. I'm not asking you to control her. I'm asking you to make sure nothing happens to her while I figure out how to fix this. Jae-sung nodded once and left. It wasn't the first order like this he'd carried out. It was the first one that felt like it mattered more than the company's stock price. That same week, Director Kim knocked on Gun-woo's open door, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He set one down without being asked. He'd learned Gun-woo's habits over a decade of working beside him, back when the company was small enough that everyone still ate lunch in the same room. You look like hell, Kim said, settling into the chair across from him. I heard about Tiana. I'm sorry. Gunwoo didn't answer right away. I don't want sympathy, he finally said. Good, because I didn't bring any. Kim allowed a small, tired smile. I brought this instead. You haven't eaten since yesterday. Gunwoo almost laughed. You talk to my assistant now? I talk to everyone. That's the job. Kim's expression softened, though something behind his eyes stayed very still, very measured. Whatever happens with Tiana, don't let it bleed into the company. The board is nervous about the Busan numbers. I've been keeping them calm, but I can only do that for so long. There was something almost too practiced in the way he said it. A man who had spent 11 years learning exactly how patience looked from the outside, and exactly how long resentment could be kept invisible underneath it. Gunwoo, exhausted and grieving, didn't notice. I'll be present, Gunwoo said. I know you will. Kim stood, buttoning his jacket. You always are. A pause, just half a beat too long. Your father chose well when he made you CEO instead of me, all those years ago. I've never once said otherwise. He smiled, and it looked almost real. Just make sure you're present, for the right reasons this time. He left the coffee on the desk, and the door opened behind him. 3 days later, Tiana found the old neighborhood clinic 2 blocks from Maya's apartment. A squat brick building with boarded windows and a faded sign that still read Mosaic District Clinic. Closed for 2 years, funding gone, forgotten by the city. She started clearing debris that same afternoon. By the end of the week, Maya was sweeping floors after school let out, and 2 of Tiana's old colleagues had shown up with boxes of donated supplies. You're serious about this, Maya said, watching her sister scrub a decade of grime off an exam table. I've never been more serious about anything. The first crate of medical equipment arrived without a name attached. The delivery driver only shrugged when Tiana asked who sent it. Paperwork just says, anonymous donor. Happens more than you'd think. She stood in the doorway a long time after he left, a strange knot forming in her chest. She told herself it didn't matter who sent it. The clinic needed it. That was enough. It didn't stop her from wondering. Not everyone was happy to see the clinic coming back to life. 2 nights later, Tiana arrived before sunrise to find the front window cracked. A single word spray-painted across the brick she didn't bother reading twice. Nothing taken. Nothing disturbed. It felt less like a robbery and more like a message. She swept up the glass herself before the volunteers arrived. She didn't tell anyone how unsettled it made her. She didn't know that 3 miles away, a man she'd left behind was staring at a security alert he'd quietly arranged to receive. Gunwoo read the report twice, jaw tight, and told Jae-sung to double the watch. He said nothing to anyone else. He also didn't know that the same report had crossed another desk first. Director Kim's, routed there automatically as part of standard building security protocol, the way dozens of minor incident reports crossed his desk every week without anyone thinking twice about it. Kim read it once, filed it, and made no comment. He was a patient man. He had learned, a long time ago, that the smallest cracks were often the most useful ones to leave alone. Back at headquarters, Gunwoo found himself pulling old files late into the night. The charity hospital project from 5 years earlier, the one Tiana had helped organize, before either of them understood what it would cost her. A single shipment record was missing from the archive. Not deleted. Missing, like it had never existed at all. He mentioned it to no one but Daniel. Probably an old filing error, Daniel said, unconvinced by his own words. But you should keep pulling that thread. Gunwoo intended to. What he didn't see was Director Kim, 2 floors below, watching the archive access log update in real time, Gunwoo's name appearing beside a file that hadn't been opened in 5 years. Kim sat very still, coffee going cold in his hand, the warmth from their conversation days earlier draining fast from his face. He thought of a boardroom 11 years ago, and a chairman who had looked past him without a second glance in favor of his own son. He thought of how long he had waited, how carefully he had built around that single old wound, and how close he had come to finally being finished with it. He picked up his phone and made a call he had hoped he would never have to make again. Gunwoo stayed at his desk until the sky outside turned gray. The manifest was still open on his screen, Tiana's handwriting still burning a hole in the corner of the page. He remembered it now. 5 years ago, before the wedding, She'd come with him to review a shipment of donated equipment for a charity hospital project. A favor, a distraction, an excuse to spend an afternoon together during the only slow week his calendar had that quarter. She'd flipped through invoices while he took calls, circled a few numbers. These totals don't add up. Did somebody make a mistake? Or is somebody hiding one? He'd laughed it off, kissed her forehead, told her not to worry about spreadsheets on her day off. He hadn't thought about it again, until 3 nights ago. Daniel found him there the next morning, the same chair, a fresh cup of coffee gone cold beside him. 5 years ago, the charity shipment audit. Do you remember it? Daniel's expression shifted. Why are you asking me that now? Because her handwriting is in the margins of a file that should never have left this building. What happened, Daniel? Daniel was quiet a long moment. That single question she asked, it wasn't nothing. It was the first thread of a fraud investigation that nearly took down the company, and it nearly took her down with it. Why wasn't I told any of this? You were the one who buried it, Daniel said quietly. You don't remember, because you made sure you'd never have to. He didn't say the name Kim. He wasn't sure yet how much he was allowed to suspect out loud. The clinic, 3 weeks into its rebuild, had started to breathe again. Fresh paint, a donated waiting room set, a hand-painted sign, Riverside Community Clinic, the letters slightly uneven because Maya's students had helped paint them. That evening, Gunwoo came without calling ahead. He stood across the street, half hidden by a delivery truck, and watched through the window. Tiana crouched in front of a little girl no older than 6, a butterfly bandage taped over a scraped knee. She said something he couldn't hear, and the girl laughed. A real laugh, unguarded, and Tiana laughed with her. He hadn't heard her laugh like that in over a year. He didn't go inside. He told himself it was because he didn't want to intrude on something that wasn't his anymore. The truer reason sat heavier in his chest. He was afraid that if she saw him, her smile would disappear the way it always used to at home. He stood there until the porch light came on and the last patient left, then drove back to a penthouse that no longer felt like a home at all. 2 days later, a second anonymous shipment arrived at the clinic. Medical scholarships for 3 young residents. Their tuition suddenly, mysteriously covered for the year. Tiana stared at the confirmation letter, then at Maya. This is the same handwriting style as the donor paperwork. So it's the same person. It's someone connected to the company. Tiana's jaw tightened. I just don't understand why they won't say who. That afternoon, she found Daniel waiting outside the clinic, uncharacteristically without an appointment. Why does it feel like Gunwoo is always nearby? She asked. Even when he isn't. Daniel hesitated. For a moment, it looked like he might tell her everything. Instead, he said only, because some people never really stop loving someone, even when they don't know how to show it right. It wasn't an answer, but it kept her awake that night, wondering what exactly he wasn't telling her. Inside Lee Medical Technologies, Director Kim moved with practiced calm. Late that night, he accessed the archived Charity Division server one more time, deleting 3 files that had resurfaced in a recent audit trail, replacing them with clean, doctored versions before anyone else could look closely. When a junior analyst flagged the missing files the next morning, Kim was already prepared. Someone in data migration must have made an error, he said smoothly. I'll have IT look into it. These interns. He shook his head, almost fondly, and the analyst apologized for even bringing it up. No one questioned him. No one ever did, which was, in its own way, exactly the point of 11 years spent being the most agreeable man in every room. He lingered afterward at his window, looking down at the street where he knew, from the incident report still sitting in his files, a certain neighborhood clinic stood 2 miles east. He hadn't decided yet what to do about the doctor rebuilding it. He only knew that the closer Gunwoo got to the truth, the more useful she might eventually become. The envelope arrived at the clinic 3 days later, slid under the front door overnight. No return address. Tiana found it before opening hours, sat down at the front desk, and unfolded a set of photocopied financial reports. Old, formatted differently than anything the company used now. She flipped to the 3rd page and stopped breathing for a second. Her own handwriting stared back at her from the margin. 5 years younger, circling a column of numbers that didn't add up. Did somebody make a mistake? Or is somebody hiding one? She didn't understand yet what she was looking at, but she understood, with sudden clarity, that this had nothing to do with her clinic, and everything to do with a question she'd asked once, in passing, on an ordinary afternoon she barely remembered. Slowly, the pieces began to arrange themselves: the anonymous equipment, the scholarships, the badge, the man who had said, "I don't know what she wants from me," and meant it, because he'd been protecting her from something he'd never let her see. She hadn't just asked an innocent question 5 years ago. Without ever knowing it, she had saved her husband's life, and he had spent every year since making sure she'd never find out how. Tiana didn't call ahead. She drove straight to Lee Medical Technologies, the photocopied pages folded in her coat pocket, and walked past the front desk without stopping. Security didn't try to stop her. Jae-sung had left standing orders that she was to move through the building freely, always, an order Gunwoo had given without ever telling her why. She found him in his office, still buried in the same 5-year-old files. She set the envelope on his desk, the same desk where she'd once left her badge. "Tell me the truth," she said. "All of it." So he did. "You found inconsistencies in a supply shipment 5 years ago," he said. "You were right. Someone was skimming charity funds to finance a hostile takeover of this company. Your question, one question, over invoices, is the reason we caught it before it succeeded." "Then why?" Tiana said quietly. "Did I spend 5 years having no idea I did anything at all?" "Because the people behind it don't forgive loose ends. If your name stayed attached to that discovery, you became a target." He held her gaze. "I erased every record connecting you to it. I made Daniel help me. I made sure you'd never know, because if you never knew, you'd never be in danger for knowing. You trusted strangers with the truth," she said. "Lawyers, security teams, people paid to keep your secrets, not your own wife." She shook her head slowly. "In 5 years of marriage, you never once decided I was strong enough to carry something hard beside you. I decided you were worth protecting, even from the truth." "That's not protection," she said, voice finally cracking. "That's a cage with better furniture." Neither of them said anything for a long time. She left without the envelope. He didn't stop her. Neither of them was wrong. Neither of them was completely right. Director Kim heard about the confrontation within hours, the kind of news that always found its way to him eventually, one assistant to another, until it reached the executive floor. Gunwoo had confessed, which meant the past could no longer stay buried on its own. Kim closed his office door and sat for a long moment before he picked up his phone. He didn't dial the number he usually used for arrangements like this. He dialed one he kept separate. A private line, unregistered, the kind of number a careful man keeps for exactly one purpose. When it connected, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. "It's active again," he said. He knows enough to keep pulling the thread. "I want eyes on her personally, not a rotation, not a contractor who reports back through 3 layers. I want to know everywhere she goes, and I want to know it from you directly." A pause. "This one I'm handling myself." It wasn't only business anymore. 11 years of being the man everyone trusted and no one credited had narrowed, quietly, into something closer to a grudge, and Tiana Washington had become the fastest way to finally settle it. 2 days later, a photographer caught Tiana leaving the clinic and posted her name online within the hour. By morning, 3 more outlets had picked it up. By afternoon, reporters gathered outside the clinic doors, shouting questions at frightened mothers trying to bring their children inside. "Were you involved in the corporate investigation 5 years ago?" That last question stopped Tiana cold. Nobody outside a handful of people should have known there'd ever been an investigation at all. She got her patients inside, closed the blinds, and stood very still in the waiting room, pulse loud in her ears. Someone had leaked more than her name. Someone had leaked exactly enough to make sure she understood she was being watched. That night, Maya woke to the fire escape rattling outside their window. She crossed the room in the dark. Nothing outside. Empty alley. Wind, maybe. Except the window latch, the one they always checked, was unlocked. She almost didn't tell Tiana in the morning. The words came out anyway, careful, like saying them might make it real. "I think someone was outside our building last night." Tiana had learned over the last several weeks to stop dismissing small wrong things. She changed the locks herself that afternoon. The following evening, walking to her car, Tiana became certain of something she'd only suspected before. The same dark sedan that had idled near the clinic for 2 days was now idling half a block from her apartment. She stopped walking. The car didn't move, didn't follow, just sat there, engine running, windows tinted too dark to see through, and for one unsettling second, she thought she saw the outline of someone in the back seat lean forward slightly, watching her the way a man watches something he already considers his. She made herself walk calmly the rest of the way, unlocked her door, and stood with her back against it once she was inside. She called Jae-sung's private line, a number she'd found weeks earlier, saved under an unfamiliar contact in a phone Gun-woo had once set up for her, the one piece of his old protection she'd never quite deleted. "Someone's watching me," she said, before he could even say hello. "I need you to tell me the truth. Is this you, or is this someone else?" The silence lasted a half-second too long. "It's not my team, Dr. Washington," Jae-sung said carefully. "My team has kept distance exactly as instructed. Someone else is running surveillance on you." A pause. "I'm calling Mr. Lee right now." Gun-woo arrived at the clinic before dawn. "There's a dark sedan," she said. "Reporters knew things about the investigation that were never public. Someone unlocked our fire escape window 2 nights ago. I thought I was imagining things. I'm not imagining things." Something in his face changed, the calculation of a man who'd spent his whole life solving problems with resources and control, watching all of it fail at once. "I should never have let you find out alone," he said. "Not the investigation, not this, any of it. I don't need you to protect me from this," Tiana said, and for the first time since she'd left the badge on his desk, her voice wasn't hard. It was afraid, and honest. "I need you to face it beside me." He nodded once. For the first time in 5 years, it wasn't a promise made from a distance. At Lee Medical Technologies, Director Kim sat across from 2 men who had flown in that morning under false names, foreign investors with no public connection to the company and every incentive to see Gun-woo removed from it permanently. "He confessed everything to her," Kim said. "The wife knows. The husband is unraveling 5 years of careful work in a matter of days. If he keeps pulling that thread, he finds all of it. The shell accounts, the takeover financing, my name on every one of them." "Then remove the thread," one investor said simply. Kim didn't flinch. He'd spent 11 years being the man nobody suspected. He wasn't about to let one stubborn CEO and his wife undo that now. And there was, underneath the calculation, something almost satisfying about the idea of being the one who finally made Lee Gun-woo understand what it felt like to lose something he couldn't buy back. He picked up his phone and typed a single message to a number that existed nowhere in any company record. "Tiana Washington becomes our leverage. Move tonight. I'll confirm the location myself." Tiana locked up the clinic just after 9, later than she meant to, the last patient finally sent home. Maya had left an hour earlier. The street outside was quiet, the reporters gone, the dark sedan parked in its usual spot at the corner. What she didn't know was that the sedan wasn't the threat tonight. It never had been. It was only ever there to make her watch it, so she wouldn't notice the second car, unmarked, parked on the opposite side of the block, where a man she'd never met sat waiting for a text message from a number he didn't recognize but had learned, over the past week, always to obey. "She's leaving now, confirm visual, then move." Director Kim sent that message himself, from the back seat of a car 3 streets away, close enough to know exactly when it happened, far enough to never be seen. She didn't have time to reach for her phone. Gun-woo was still at the office when Jae-sung called, and he knew from the first half-second of silence that something had gone wrong. "Say it," Gun-woo said, already on his feet. "She's gone, sir. Her car is still here. Her bag, her phone, everything's here except her." Security lost visual for less than 4 minutes. That's all it took. He didn't remember the drive. He remembered arriving at the clinic and seeing her car exactly where Jae-sung said it would be, door still unlocked, keys still in the ignition. He found the badge on the ground near the driver's side, the same one she'd worn for 5 years, dropped or thrown, he couldn't tell which. For the second time, she was gone. This time, it wasn't her choice. This time, it was his fault. 20 minutes later, one of Jae-sung's contacts inside the city's traffic authority flagged a match. a delivery van matching the plate on the surveillance footage, last seen heading toward an old warehouse district near the harbor. Gun-woo didn't wait for police confirmation. He didn't wait for a plan. He took 2 of Jae-sung's men and went straight there, certain, for the first time all night, that he finally had something solid to hold on to. The warehouse was empty, not abandoned, empty in a way that felt deliberate, doors unlocked, lights left on, a single folding chair positioned in the center of the room like it had been staged for him to find. No Tiana, no sign she'd ever been there at all. Gun-woo stood in the center of that empty room and for the first time in his life felt something close to true panic. Not the controlled urgency of a boardroom crisis, but the raw, useless fear of a man who had followed every instinct he had and still arrived too late. His phone rang. He answered before the first ring finished. "You went to the harbor." Director Kim's voice was almost gentle, which made it worse. "I wondered how long it would take you to burn 20 minutes chasing a decoy. Long enough, as it turns out." A pause, savoring it. "You still don't understand what you took from me 11 years ago, do you? I built half of what this company is. I sat in every room you sat in, and when your father chose between us, he chose the son who could shake the right hands, not the man who actually kept the numbers from collapsing." "Where is she?" Gun-woo's voice had gone very quiet, very still. "Complete control. Your resignation, effective tonight. Full transfer of authority. Your public silence guaranteed. Sign it, hand over everything, and disappear quietly. Or she becomes an example of what happens to people who get in my way." A pause. "You've had everything handed to you your entire life. I want you to know, just once, what it feels like to lose the one thing you can't buy back." The line went dead. Gun-woo stood alone in the empty warehouse, 20 wasted minutes behind him, holding a phone that had just delivered the only ultimatum in his life he didn't need a second to consider, and understanding, for the first time, that being careful, being controlled, being the man who always found the right solution, hadn't saved her tonight. It had cost them exactly the time Kim needed. He would not make that mistake again. He called Daniel from the car, voice steadier than he felt. "Every resignation document you can draft in the next hour. Full transfer of my shares. Full authority to the board. And send everything, every file, every account, every piece of evidence on Kim's fraud, to the prosecutor's office tonight, along with what I concealed 5 years ago. All of it, including what implicates me. Gun-woo, if you hand yourself into that along with him, I don't care." His voice cracked, the first time Daniel had ever heard it. "I chased a decoy tonight because I thought I could solve this the way I solve everything. Quietly, carefully, with enough resources to control the outcome. It cost us 20 minutes we can't get back. I'm done being careful. If the only way Kim lets her go is watching me lose everything I built, then he can have it. All of it." Daniel was quiet a moment. "I'll have the documents ready before you get here." He signed without reading a single page. "You understand what this means," one director said. "The market will react within hours. Your family's legacy." "My family's legacy is not worth more than my wife's life," Gun-woo said, not looking up. "If that's a strange thing for a CEO to say, then I stopped being the right person for this job a long time ago." Within the hour, prosecutors received an encrypted file containing 11 years of falsified shipping manifests, laundered charity funds, shell account transfers, and Director Kim's handwriting connecting all of it. Alongside a second file, Gun-woo insisted on including himself, detailing exactly how he had erased evidence of his own wife's role in the original discovery. Kim's leverage collapsed within the hour. The moment authorities confirmed Gun-woo's resignation and the evidence package, the 2 foreign investors backing him severed contact immediately. He answered his phone once more, voice tight. "You just destroyed both of us." "No," Gun-woo said quietly. "I just stopped letting you destroy her." This time, the location came from something Kim hadn't accounted for. Daniel's evidence package included transaction records for a private security contractor Kim had used exactly twice before, both times tied to properties registered under a cousin's name. Police reached the second address within the hour. Gun-woo arrived before they did, ignoring every instruction from Jae-sung to wait. Moving through a half-finished parking structure, with nothing but his phone's flashlight and a desperation he'd never let himself feel out loud before. He found her in a locked storage room, unharmed but shaken, hands bound, sitting upright against the wall with the same steady composure she brought into every trauma bay, refusing to let fear win, even now. Gunwoo. He didn't say anything. He crossed the room, dropped to his knees, and worked the restraints loose with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since Jae-sung's first call. When she was free, he pulled her into his arms like he was afraid she might disappear again if he let go too soon. "I went to the wrong place first," he said quietly, voice breaking against her hair. "I lost 20 minutes chasing exactly what he wanted me to chase. I signed everything away after that. The company, my name, all of it. I don't care what's left in the morning. I only cared about getting to you. You didn't have to lose everything for me. You were never the thing I was protecting to keep," he whispered. "You were the only thing I was ever supposed to protect for. I just understood that 5 years, and one very bad 20 minutes, too late." Police arrived minutes later. Kim was arrested quietly, the fight already gone the moment his leverage disappeared. At the hospital, Gunwoo sat beside Tiana's bed, refusing to leave even when Daniel gently suggested he go home and rest. He held her hand instead, and for the first time in 5 years, told her everything. Not the edited version, but all of it. The fear. The 5-year-old decision to erase her from an investigation that could have gotten her killed. The years of anonymous donations because saying "I still love you" out loud felt too dangerous. The empty warehouse tonight, and the 20 minutes he would carry with him for a long time. "I kept thinking," he said, "that if I could just protect you well enough, I wouldn't have to be honest with you. Tonight I learned that being careful and being honest aren't the same thing at all. One of them almost got you killed." Tiana studied his face for a long time, the composure finally gone, nothing left of the untouchable CEO the world had built out of him, only a man who had failed once, badly, and then given away an empire without hesitating a second time. "You're not the same man who let me walk out that door," she said quietly. "No," Gunwoo said, "I'm not." Everything he had built was gone by morning, but for the first time in 5 years, nothing between them remained hidden, and he understood, finally, that trust wasn't something you earned back in a single night, no matter how much you were willing to lose to prove it. Director Kim's arrest made headlines for exactly one news cycle before the story moved on to something else, the way scandals involving powerful men often do. 11 years of theft, a hostile takeover funded through stolen charity funds. The evidence Gunwoo handed over was thorough enough that prosecutors barely needed to build a case. He'd already built it for them, at the cost of everything he owned. Kim didn't speak to reporters on his way into custody. The documents spoke clearly enough on their own. The board elected new leadership within a month. Gunwoo didn't contest it, didn't lobby for a return. He submitted his resignation letter a second time, cleaner this time, official, no longer a negotiation with a man holding his wife hostage, just a quiet acknowledgement that the company would be fine without him. He walked out on a Tuesday afternoon carrying a single box. No press waited outside, just Daniel leaning against a car at the curb. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked. Gunwoo considered it honestly. One, and it wasn't the company. For the first few weeks after the rescue, Tiana kept her distance, not out of anger, but out of something harder to name. She'd spent 5 years believing distance was something Gunwoo did to her. Now she needed some of her own, on her own terms, to figure out who she was when nobody was protecting or endangering her at all. He didn't push. He sent no flowers, made no declarations. He simply let her have the space, and used it to start becoming someone he could stand to be alone with. He started volunteering at the clinic in its second month, 3 days a week, not as a donor and not as a doctor. He had no training for that, but doing whatever needed doing, carrying supplies, fixing a generator that kept failing, sitting with frightened patients in the waiting room until someone was free. The first few weeks were clumsy. He over-organized a supply closet so thoroughly that a nurse couldn't find anything for 2 days and told him, not unkindly, to stop running it like a shareholder meeting. He apologized, laughed at himself, something Tiana had rarely seen him do, and let the nurse reorganize it her way instead. Small moments like that added up slower than either of them expected. 2 months in, Tiana asked him to stop coming for a week. Not permanently, just long enough, she said, to be sure she wasn't only getting used to him being around again, because it was easier than sitting with what he'd done. He didn't argue. He didn't call. He spent that week rebuilding a strained relationship with his father instead, sitting across from Chairman Lee for the first time since the resignation, listening to a man who had spent his whole life believing emotion made leaders weak, finally admit, quietly, that maybe strength had never meant what he thought it did. When Gunwoo came back to the clinic the following week, Tiana didn't say anything about the space she'd asked for. She just handed him a crate of supplies and nodded toward the back room, like he'd never left. It was the first time either of them treated the absence as something survivable instead of something to fear. 4 months after the rescue, the clinic officially reopened under a new name, Community Trauma Center, painted in fresh letters across a building that no longer looked abandoned. Families lined up outside on opening day. Children ran through a waiting room with color on the walls, and doctors who had chosen to be there. Tiana stood in the doorway that morning and allowed herself, finally, to feel proud of something she'd built entirely on her own terms. Gunwoo stood near the back of the crowd, not beside her, not announced, just present, the way he'd learned, slowly, that presence mattered more than solutions. 6 months in, most of the staff still had no idea who he used to be. When someone asked what he did before, he usually said, "I used to run a company, it's a long story," and left it there. He'd stopped needing anyone to know. It was Tiana who told him, one evening, that she'd started noticing the difference, not in what he said, but in what he no longer tried to control. "You used to walk into a room like you already knew how it was going to go," she said. "You don't do that anymore." "I don't know how most things are going to go anymore," he admitted. "It turns out I like it better this way. Frightening, but better." She laughed. The real kind, the one he used to hear through a clinic window from the other side of the street, back when it wasn't his to hear at all. They started having dinner together once a week. Nothing formal, usually at a small place near the clinic she used to go to after night shifts, long before any of this. Not an apology, not an ending, just one evening at a time, both of them learning how to be honest without an agenda attached to it. It took months before either of them used the word reconciliation out loud, and even then, only carefully, like testing whether a bridge could hold weight, before either of them stepped fully onto it. Nearly a year after the night she'd left a badge on his desk, Tiana found him in the clinic's supply closet on a quiet Sunday afternoon, fixing a shelf no one had asked him to fix, sleeves rolled up, entirely unhurried. She'd had the box made months earlier. She'd carried it in her bag on and off since, taking it out sometimes, putting it back before she could decide it was time. Today, watching him kneel on the floor over something small and unglamorous, she finally understood why she'd waited this long. It hadn't been about testing him. It had been about making sure that when she gave it to him, it would mean what it was supposed to mean. Not relief, not closure, but a genuine belief, built slowly and carefully over a year, that he'd actually become someone worth standing beside. "I don't need someone to protect me anymore," she said. He looked up, startled, then slowly stood. She opened the box. Inside sat a badge, newly printed, not the old executive security badge that used to hang near her collar, but something different. Executive partner. "This isn't about protecting me," she said quietly. "It's about trusting you. It took me a long time to be sure I meant that, and not just that I missed you." Gunwoo looked at the badge for a long moment before he reached for it. "I don't know if I've fully earned this," he said honestly. "Maybe not fully forever," Tiana said. "But you've earned this year. That's not nothing. That's actually everything, when you think about how we got here." He took the badge slowly, turning it once in his hand before clipping it, quietly, where the old one used to sit. "One step at a time," he said. "Isn't that what you told me, back at the beginning?" "It's still what I'm telling you," she said. "It's just been a year of steps now. And I think that's exactly why this one finally feels real." Outside, the late afternoon light spilled through the clinic's front windows, catching the newly painted walls, the waiting room full of people who had nowhere else like this to go, the life the two of them had rebuilt. Not quickly, not easily, but honestly, one ordinary day at a time. Love isn't measured by how many burdens you carry alone. It's measured by the patience to rebuild trust one honest day at a time, and the wisdom to know that some things worth having are only real because they took so long to earn. Thank you for staying to the end of today's video. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think about the difference between protecting someone and actually trusting them, do me a favor and drop a comment below. I read every single one, and honestly, they're the best part of making these. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need a good story tonight. And if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, because I've got a lot more stories just like this one coming. Love, betrayal, second chances, the kind of drama that keeps you up way later than you planned. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Tiana was right to leave that badge on his desk? Or do you think Gunwoo deserved more of a chance to explain himself before she walked out? I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.